The stars looked different here. Captain Lee Dae-ho stood on the bridge of the Serenity's dawn, watching unknown constellations through the main view screen. The hyperspace jump had gone perfectly, just like the hundreds before it. But something felt wrong. "Captain," Communications Officer Kim So-ra called from her station. Her voice was calm but alert. "I'm picking up multiple energy signatures, large ones." Lee walked over to her console. The screen showed dozens of red dots surrounding their position. Each dot was bigger than their ship. Much bigger. "How many?" Lee asked. 47 ships, sir. They're closing in fast." Chief Science Officer Park Ji-won looked up from her instruments. "Captain, these aren't like any ships in our databases. The energy readings are incredible. Their weapons could destroy us easily." Chief Engineer Choi Woo-jin stepped forward. His face was serious but not worried. "Our shields are good but not against that much firepower. Should I prepare the emergency jump?" Lee thought for a moment. Running away was always an option. But they were explorers, not soldiers. Their mission was to meet new life, to learn and share knowledge. Fear would not help them do that. "No," Lee said quietly. "We came here in peace. Let's see what they want." The alien ships formed a perfect circle around them. They were dark and sharp, built like weapons themselves. Each one could hold thousands of crew members. The human ship looked tiny next to them. Kim So-ra's console beeped. "Incoming transmission, Captain." "Put it on screen." The view screen flickered. A face appeared that made several crew members step back. The alien was tall and thin with gray skin and bright red eyes. Sharp teeth showed when it spoke. Its voice was like grinding metal. "Unknown vessel," the alien said. "You have entered the territory of the Valtharian Empire. I am Admiral Vorkath of the Third Fleet. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." The bridge fell silent. Everyone looked at Captain Lee. In human space, this would be a declaration of war. Most species would either run or fight. But Lee just nodded politely. "Greetings, Admiral Vorkath," Lee said with a slight bow. "I am Captain Lee Dae-ho of the Earth vessel Serenity's Dawn. We come in peace and request permission to pass through your territory." Admiral Vorkath's red eyes narrowed. Something flickered across his face that might have been confusion. "Request permission? You are surrounded by the Third Fleet. You have no choice but surrender." "We understand that," Lee replied calmly. "And we respect your authority in your space. Please let us know what we can do to resolve this peacefully." On the alien ship's bridge, Vorkath stared at the human captain. In 300 years of military service, no one had ever spoken to him like this. Species either begged for mercy or screamed threats. They never just accepted the situation and asked how to help. "Captain," Lieutenant Kessera whispered to the admiral. She was young for a Valtharian officer but skilled. "Their ship has almost no weapons, just basic defensive systems." "Are they hiding something?" Vorkath asked. "I don't think so, sir. Our scans show their crew is remarkably calm. No stress chemicals, no preparation for battle, they're just waiting." Back on the human ship, Park Ji-won was studying the alien vessels. "Captain, look at this," she said, pointing to her screen. "Their ship designs are amazing. The engineering is incredible. These people are highly advanced." Kim So-ra nodded. "I'm learning their language patterns. It's complex but beautiful. I think I can set up better communication soon." Choi Woo-jin was checking their own systems. "Everything is running smoothly, Captain. If they want to talk, we're ready." Lee smiled slightly. His crew was doing exactly what they should do, staying curious and helpful instead of panicking. This was why he loved being an explorer. The admiral's voice came through the speakers again. "Captain Lee, your behavior is unusual. What are your intentions in our space?" "We're explorers, Admiral. We're on a mission to learn about the galaxy and meet new civilizations. We didn't know this was your territory. If we're not welcome, we'll leave immediately." Vorkath looked at his tactical officer. "Show me their ship again." The human vessel appeared on his screen. It was sleek and white. built for speed and efficiency. There were sensor arrays for studying space, laboratories for research, and living spaces for the crew. But the weapon systems were tiny, barely enough to stop asteroids. "They're telling the truth," his science officer reported. "This is an exploration vessel, not a warship." "But why aren't they afraid?" Lieutenant Cassara asked quietly. It was a good question. Every species the Empire had encountered showed fear when surrounded by the Third Fleet. Fear was useful. It made conquest easier. But these humans seemed genuinely interested in conversation. "Captain Lee," Admiral Vorkath said, "prepare to be boarded. We will inspect your vessel." "Of course, Admiral. We'll be happy to show you around. Should we prepare anything special for your visit?" Again, that strange reaction. Not resistance or terror, but polite cooperation. Vorkath felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. An hour later, Valtherian soldiers beamed onto the human ship. They were tall and armored, carrying weapons that could cut through steel. The humans who met them were smaller, wearing simple uniforms and completely unarmed. Captain Lee stepped forward with a welcoming smile. "Admiral Vorkath, welcome aboard the Serenity's Dawn. Would you like a tour of our ship?" The Admiral studied the human captain. Lee stood relaxed, hands at his sides, no sign of fear or aggression. Behind him, his crew watched with curiosity, not terror. "Your weapons," Vorkath demanded. "We have some tools for mining and construction," Lee replied. "And basic defensive systems. Would you like to see them?" This was wrong. Every boarding in Vorkath's experience involved either cowering prisoners or desperate fighters. These humans acted like they were greeting friends. Park Ji-won stepped forward. "Admiral, if I may ask, what kind of propulsion do your ships use? The energy signatures are fascinating." The science officer was asking about their technology, not begging for mercy, not trying to bargain, just genuinely curious about how their ships worked. Choi Woo-jin nodded toward the Valtherian equipment. "Those are impressive weapons. The power regulation must be incredibly complex. Even their engineer was more interested in learning than surviving." Kim Sora spoke up in surprisingly good Valtherian. "Your language has beautiful grammatical structures, Admiral. How many dialects are there in your empire?" Vorkath felt something crack in his understanding of the universe. These beings were about to be captured by the most feared fleet in the Eker galaxy, and they wanted to discuss grammar and engineering. "You show no fear," he said finally. Captain Lee tilted his head thoughtfully. "Should we? You seem like reasonable people. We made a mistake entering your space without permission. We're happy to correct that mistake, however you think is best." "Could destroy your ship in seconds. Yes, we know, your technology is impressive. But why would you want to destroy explorers? We're no threat to anyone." Lieutenant Cassara watched the exchange in amazement. She had seen the Admiral break enemy commanders with his presence alone. But this human captain treated him like a colleague having a friendly disagreement. "You will come with us to meet the Emperor," Vorkath said, trying to regain control of the situation. "That would be an honor," Lee replied immediately. "We'd love to learn about your civilization. Should we follow your ships, or would you prefer to escort us?" The Admiral stared at him. In his language, being taken to the Emperor was a death sentence. Every prisoner knew this. But Captain Lee spoke as if he had just been invited to a cultural exchange. As the Valtherian boarding party prepared to leave, Park Ji-won approached one of the soldiers. "Excuse me, could you tell me what that device does? I've never seen anything like it." The soldier looked confused. Prisoners didn't usually ask about their captor's equipment with scientific interest. When the aliens were gone, the human crew gathered on the bridge. "Well," Choi Woo-jin said with a slight smile, "that was interesting." "They seemed surprised by our reaction," Kim So-ra observed. "I think they expected us to be more frightened." "Their technology is remarkable," Park Ji-won added. "I hope we get a chance to learn more about it." Captain Lee nodded. "Set course to follow their leadership, and everyone, remember, we're ambassadors now. Let's make humanity proud." As the human ship moved deeper into Valtherian space, surrounded by the Third Fleet, the crew prepared for whatever came next. They weren't warriors or diplomats by training. They were simply people who believed that understanding others was worth any risk. Behind them, on the Admiral's flagship, Vorkath stood staring at the human vessel. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. These beings had turned surrender into an invitation for friendship. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Vorkath was truly afraid, not of the humans, weapons, or their numbers, but of something far more dangerous, their complete inability to see him as an enemy. The message reached Emperor Nexthul while he was reviewing reports of the latest rebellion. 3 star systems had dared to resist imperial rule. His response had been swift and brutal, entire cities reduced to ash as examples to others. Admiral, Vorkath's report made him pause. Beings who showed no fear of the Third Fleet? Impossible. Every species in the galaxy knew to tremble before Valtharian might. Bring them to me, the Emperor commanded. I will see these fearless creatures myself. The journey to Valtharia Prime would take 5 days. Captain Lee accepted the news with his usual calm manner. An audience with your Emperor? That's quite an honor. We'll do our best to represent humanity well. Admiral Vorkath studied the human captain through the communication screen. You understand this is not a request? Of course, Admiral. We're grateful for the opportunity. The words were polite, but something in Lee's tone suggested he genuinely meant them, as if meeting the most feared ruler in the galaxy was simply an interesting experience to look forward to. As the fleet moved toward the capital, strange things began to happen, small things that confused the Valtharian crews. On the second day, a patrol ship's engine failed during a routine maneuver. The vessel drifted helplessly, its crew working desperately to prevent a reactor meltdown. Standard procedure was to evacuate the crew and let the ship explode safely. Chief Engineer Choi Woo-jin was monitoring communications when he heard the distress signals. Without asking permission, he contacted the damaged ship directly. This is Engineer Choi from the human vessel, he said in carefully practiced Valtharian. We have experience with reactor problems. Can we help? The patrol ship's captain was shocked into silence. Prisoners offering to help their captors? It made no sense. We don't need alien assistance, the captain replied stiffly. No problem, Choi said cheerfully. But if you change your mind, we've got some tricks that might work. My people have dealt with similar issues before. An hour later, when their own efforts failed, the patrol ship quietly accepted the human offer. Choi spent 3 hours walking their engineers through a complex but elegant solution. The ship's reactor stabilized perfectly. Why did you help us? The Valtharian captain asked afterward. Your crew was in danger, Choi replied simply. That's reason enough. The incident was reported to Admiral Vorkath, who filed it away with growing unease. His prisoners were actively trying to save Valtharian lives. On the 3rd day, Dr. Park, G1 made contact with the science officers on the escort ships. What started as questions about their journey became a fascinating discussion about cosmic phenomena. Your analysis of the nebula we passed is brilliant, Park told Commander Veltar of the Iron Fist. I never thought to check for those energy patterns. Veltar found himself explaining Valtharian scientific methods to an alien who listened with genuine interest. Park shared human discoveries in return, describing techniques that made Veltar's scientific mind race with possibilities. Your people study the universe for knowledge alone? Veltar asked. Of course, Park replied. Understanding creation is one of life's greatest joys. Don't your scientists feel the same? Veltar realized he hadn't thought about the joy of discovery. In decades, science in the Empire served military purposes. But this human spoke of learning as if it were music or art, something beautiful in itself. Lieutenant Kasara found herself drawn into conversations with Kim Sora about language and culture. The human communications officer was fascinated by Valtharian history. Your empire has lasted 3,000 years, Kim said admiringly. The organizational skills required must be incredible. How do you coordinate so many different worlds? Through strength, Kasara answered automatically. Fear keeps order. But the practical details must be fascinating, Kim continued. The communication networks, the cultural adaptations, the administrative systems, it's like a living work of art on a galactic scale. No one had ever described the Empire as art before. Kesara found herself explaining systems she had never really thought about. How different species were managed, how information flowed across vast distances, how the bureaucracy actually functioned beneath the military surface. Your people must be incredibly talented, Kim observed, to build something this complex and keep it running for millennia. That's remarkable. Kesara felt a strange warmth at the praise. The humans seemed genuinely impressed by Valtherian achievements, not just their military power. Admiral Vorkath watched these interactions with growing alarm. His crews were supposed to guard the prisoners, not befriend them. But the humans made friendship seem so natural that resistance felt rude. Captain Lee spent his time learning about Valtherian culture from the ship's databases that were cleared for prisoner access. He asked thoughtful questions about their art, their philosophy, their history before the Empire. Your people were explorers once, Lee mentioned during one of his daily meetings with the Admiral. The early records speak of great expeditions into unknown space. That must have been an exciting time. Vorkath stiffened. Those records were ancient, from before the Empire's military focus. We became stronger by abandoning such weaknesses. Was exploration a weakness? Lee asked curiously. It seems like it would take great courage to journey into the unknown. The question bothered Vorkath more than he cared to admit. He had been taught that the old ways, exploration, scientific curiosity, artistic expression, were the follies that nearly destroyed their people. Only military strength had saved them, but this human spoke of exploration as if it were noble, and his crew's behavior supported that view. They faced the unknown with curiosity rather than conquest. On the fourth day, an incident occurred that changed everything. The human ship's life support system developed a critical malfunction. Atmospheric processors began failing, and oxygen levels dropped rapidly. The crew had perhaps 4 hours before the air became unbreathable. Admiral Vorkath prepared to beam the humans aboard his vessel as prisoners, but before he could give the order, he noticed something extraordinary. The human crew was not panicking. Captain Lee calmly organized repair teams. Dr. Park analyzed the malfunction while continuing her correspondence with Valtherian scientists. Engineer Choi worked on the processors while humming quietly to himself. Kim So-ra maintained communication schedules as if nothing was wrong. Captain, Vorkath called over the communication link. Do you require assistance? Thank you for asking, Admiral, Lee replied politely. We should have this fixed soon. Our people are quite good at emergency repairs. Your air will run out in hours. Yes, we know. But panic won't help us fix the problem faster. Better to stay calm and work efficiently. Vorkath watched in fascination, as the human crew faced possible death with the same serene confidence they had shown when surrounded by the Third Fleet. They worked together smoothly, supporting each other without drama or desperation. Lieutenant Kesara monitored their communications. Sir, they're not even discussing evacuation, they're just fixing the problem. What if they can't fix it in time? They seem to believe they will. But if not? Kesara paused, listening to the calm voices on the human ship. I think they would face death the same way they face everything else, together and without fear. The repairs succeeded with an hour to spare. Choi's team had improvised a solution using spare parts and creative engineering. When Vorkath congratulated them on their survival, Captain Lee simply thanked him for his concern. That night, Vorkath could not sleep. He kept thinking about the humans' reaction to mortal danger. In his experience, near death brought out the truth in people. Some became cowards, others became savage, most became desperate. But the humans had simply become more themselves. Calm, cooperative, focused on solutions rather than blame. The next morning brought them to Valtheria Prime. The massive world filled the view screen, covered in cities that gleamed like metal. Orbital stations surrounded the planet like a crown of steel. The Empire's capital was designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. Beautiful, Dr. Park breathed, studying the planet's engineering. The atmospheric processors alone must be incredible, and those orbital habitats, the artificial gravity systems must be revolutionary. Even facing the heart of a hostile empire, the humans reacted with wonder and curiosity. Admiral Vorkath sent his final report to the Emperor. The prisoners show no fear, no aggression, and no deception. They appear to be exactly what they claim, explorers seeking knowledge. They have assisted our crews, shared their science freely, and faced death with remarkable composure. Their most disturbing quality is their complete inability to see us as enemies. They treat us as colleagues and potential friends regardless of our actions toward them. I recommend extreme caution, my Emperor. These beings may be more dangerous than any army. As the Serenity's dawn entered the atmosphere of Valtheria Prime, Captain Lee gathered his senior officers. Remember, he told them, we represent all humanity now. Whatever happens, we show them who we really are. We stay curious, we stay kind, and we stay true to our values. Even if they execute us? Choi asked with dark humor. Especially then, Lee replied seriously. How we die matters as much as how we live. The ship landed in the Imperial spaceport, surrounded by guards and weapons. Valtheria Prime was a world built to crush spirits. Every street, every building, every monument was designed to remind visitors of their smallness before Imperial might. The spaceport itself rose like a black mountain, carved with the names of conquered worlds. Captain Lee and his officers were escorted through corridors lined with weapons from 1,000 defeated armies. Swords from proud warrior races hung next to energy cannons from advanced civilizations. Each display told the same story. Resistance was futile. The craftsmanship is remarkable, Dr. Park observed, studying a crystalline weapon from some long-dead species. The energy-focusing techniques must have taken centuries to develop. Her Valtherian guard, Sergeant Kolveth, glanced at her suspiciously. Those are the weapons of our enemies. Were they your enemies when they made these? Park asked gently. Or did they become enemies later? These are works of art as much as weapons. Kolveth had never thought of conquered weapons as art. To him, they were trophies. But looking at them through the human's eyes, he began to see the beauty in the alien designs. Kim Sora was fascinated by the architecture. The acoustic engineering is brilliant, she told her escort. These halls must carry sound perfectly. Was that intentional? The design inspires proper fear, Lieutenant Thexall replied automatically. It's certainly impressive, Kim agreed. But the way sound travels here, it's like the building itself is designed for music. Has anyone ever performed concerts in these spaces? Lieutenant Thexall paused. The Imperial Palace had been built for intimidation, but Kim was right about the acoustics. The thought of music filling these halls was strangely appealing. Chief Engineer Choi walked with quiet appreciation, occasionally stopping to examine construction details. The metallurgy here is fascinating, he mentioned to his guard. How do you prevent structural fatigue in buildings this size? Soon, both guards found themselves explaining technical details they had never considered important. The humans' questions weren't challenging Imperial authority. They were simply curious about how things worked. The throne room awaited at the palace's heart. The throne of Dominion was a chamber designed to break minds through sheer, overwhelming presence. 100 meters high and half a kilometer long, it contained the assembled might of the Empire's leadership. Emperor Nexthul sat upon a throne carved from a single massive crystal, surrounded by holographic displays showing Imperial fleets conquering distant worlds. Above him, the ceiling showed a real-time map of the galaxy with Valtherian territory marked in blood red. Thousands of courtiers lined the walls, generals who had burned planets, admirals who had shattered fleets, governors who ruled through terror. Their presence was meant to make visitors feel utterly alone and powerless. The four humans entered and stopped at the designated spot, a small circle in the vast floor. They looked around with obvious interest, taking in the scope and grandeur of the chamber. Then Captain Lee smiled. It was not a nervous smile or a defiant smirk. It was the warm smile of someone genuinely pleased to meet new people. He looked up at the Emperor and gave a respectful bow. "Your Imperial Majesty," Li said in clear Valtherian. "Thank you for granting us this audience. It's an honor to meet you." The throne room fell silent. In 3,000 years, no prisoner had ever thanked the Emperor for anything. Emperor Nexthul studied the human captain. Li stood relaxed, hands at his sides, meeting the Emperor's gaze without fear or submission. Behind him, his officers looked around with curiosity rather than terror. "You stand before the ruler of 847 star systems," Nexthul said, his voice carrying clearly through the acoustically perfect chamber. "Trillions of beings kneel when they hear my name. Yet you show no proper respect. I mean no disrespect, Your Majesty," Li replied calmly. "In our culture, respect is shown through honest interaction and sincere interest. We are both honored and fascinated to be here." Dr. Park stepped forward slightly. "Your Majesty, the engineering accomplishments we've seen are extraordinary. The scale of coordination required to build and maintain this civilization must be unprecedented." She was complimenting the Empire's achievements, not begging for mercy or denying imperial power, but genuinely impressed by what they had built. Kim Sora added, "The cultural integration alone must be remarkable. Coordinating so many different species and languages, it's like conducting a symphony across the galaxy." Engineer Choi nodded toward the throne room itself. "This chamber is a masterwork of design. The structural engineering and artistic vision working together. It's truly impressive." Emperor Nexthul felt something he had not experienced in centuries: confusion. These beings should be terrified. The throne room had been designed by the greatest psychological architects in the Empire to induce helpless awe and crushing despair. Instead, the humans admired the craftsmanship. "You do not fear me," the Emperor stated. "Should we?" Captain Li asked with genuine curiosity. "You seem like a very accomplished leader. Your empire has achieved things our people have never imagined. We're more interested than afraid. I have destroyed species for less defiance than you show. This isn't defiance, Your Majesty. This is just how we are. We explore, we learn, we try to understand. When we meet remarkable civilizations like yours, we want to know how you built something so amazing." General Mordak, the Emperor's chief military advisor, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, perhaps a demonstration would be more effective than words." Nexthul nodded slowly. At his gesture, a section of the floor opened. A group of prisoners was brought up, rebels from a recent conquest scheduled for public execution as an example to others. The prisoners were members of the Kahari species, known for their peaceful nature. They had refused to contribute soldiers to imperial armies and had been condemned for their defiance. "Watch," the Emperor commanded the humans, "and learn what happens to those who oppose us." The execution began with brutal efficiency. Energy weapons reduced the prisoners to ash while their families watched from the gallery. It was meant to be horrifying, a display of absolute power over life and death. Captain Li watched with quiet sadness. His officers stood silently beside him, their faces showing grief for the dead. But they did not look away, and they did not cry out in horror. When it was over, Li spoke quietly. "Your Majesty, we're sorry for your loss." "My loss?" The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. "Those people are gone forever," Li explained gently. "All their knowledge, their dreams, their unique perspectives on the universe, lost. That's always tragic, no matter the circumstances. They were rebels, traitors to the Empire." "Maybe," Li agreed, "but they were also people with families who loved them. They had hopes and fears, just like everyone else. Their deaths diminish us all." Dr. Park stepped forward carefully. "Your Majesty, might we request permission to observe a moment of silence for the deceased? In our culture, we honor all who have passed, regardless of the circumstances." The request was so unexpected that the Emperor granted it without thinking. For 60 seconds, the throne room fell completely silent, while the four humans stood with bowed heads, honoring the memory of executed rebels. Lieutenant Kasara, watching from her position among the court guards, felt tears she had not shed in years. No one had ever mourned imperial enemies before. When the moment ended, Captain Lee looked up at the Emperor again. "Thank you for allowing us that courtesy, Your Majesty. You grieve for my enemies. We grieve for people who died," Lee corrected gently. "We don't see enemies the same way you might. We see people who disagree, people who are afraid, people who have different ideas about how life should be lived. And yet you do not condemn me for their deaths." Lee considered this carefully. "Judgment isn't our purpose here, Your Majesty. We're trying to understand. You built an empire that has lasted 3,000 years. That requires difficult decisions. We can't judge choices we've never had to make." Emperor Nexthul stood from his throne. The humans had witnessed an execution and responded with compassion for the dead and understanding for the executioner. It was impossible. "What are you?" he demanded. "Explorers," Captain Lee replied simply. "People who believe the universe is too big and beautiful for anyone to see it alone. We travel hoping to learn from others and share what we've discovered. You have no weapons worthy of the name, no armies, no empire. What gives you this confidence?" Kim So-ra answered. "We've learned that most people, deep down, want the same things. Safety for their families, meaning in their lives, hope for the future. When we remember that, it's easier to see friends instead of enemies. Even when facing death? Especially then," Engineer Choi said quietly. "Fear makes us stupid. It makes us cruel. Better to stay curious about people, even at the end." The Emperor descended from his throne and walked closer to the humans. They did not step back or kneel. They simply waited with polite attention. "You claim to seek understanding," Nexthul said. "What do you understand about me?" Captain Lee met his gaze directly. "We understand that you've carried enormous responsibility for a very long time. We understand that you've made choices that probably cost you sleep at night. We understand that ruling an empire this size must be incredibly lonely." The words hit like physical blows. No one had acknowledged the Emperor's burden in centuries. Emperor Nexthul could not sleep. For 3 days, the humans had been his guests in the Imperial Palace, and every interaction left him more unsettled. They asked thoughtful questions about governance, admired Valtherian art, and treated palace staff with the same courtesy they showed him. It was infuriating. "Bring me General Thekmor," he commanded. General Thekmor was the Empire's chief interrogator, a being whose very presence could break the strongest minds. If anyone could crack these insufferably peaceful humans, it would be him. The general arrived within minutes. A massive Valtherian with scars covering his arms and cold intelligence in his red eyes. "You summoned me, my emperor?" "The human prisoners. I want you to extract their secrets. Learn what makes them so confident. Find their weaknesses. It will be done, my emperor. Shall I use the standard methods?" Nexthul paused. The standard methods involved pain, fear, and psychological torture. But something told him those techniques would fail with these particular subjects. "Begin with conversation," he decided. "Learn what you can through interrogation. Resort to other methods only if necessary." General Thekmor nodded and departed. He had broken thousands of prisoners over his long career. 4 peaceful humans would be simple work. An hour later, he sat across from Captain Lee in a stark interrogation chamber. The human looked calm and alert, showing no signs of stress, despite being held by the most feared interrogator in the Empire. "I am General Thekmor," he began in his most intimidating tone. "You will answer my questions truthfully or face consequences you cannot imagine." "Of course, General," Lee replied politely. "I'm happy to answer anything I can. What would you like to know?" The response was so straightforward that Thekmor hesitated. Prisoners usually began with denials, threats, or pleas for mercy. This human acted as if they were having a normal conversation. "What are humanity's military capabilities?" "Limited," Lee answered honestly. We have defense fleets around our major worlds, but nothing that could threaten an empire like yours. We're primarily focused on exploration and research. Your weapons. Technology? Basic by galactic standards. We can destroy asteroids, disable hostile ships, that sort of thing. Nothing designed for conquest. Thecamore studied the humans' biometrics. No signs of deception. Lee was telling the truth, but that made no sense. Why did your people send an unarmed ship into unknown space? Because we wanted to meet new civilizations peacefully. Armed ships tend to create misunderstandings. Better to arrive with science equipment and friendly intentions. And if you encountered hostile forces? Lee smiled slightly. We hope to turn them into friendly forces. That's usually possible if you approach people with genuine curiosity and respect. The answer was so naive that Thecamore almost laughed. But there was no naivety in the human's eyes, only quiet confidence. You have seen the Empire's power, the general continued. You have witnessed executions, yet you show no fear. Explain this. Captain Lee considered the question carefully. Fear would not help us understand your people better, General, and understanding seems more valuable than fear. Understanding your captors is valuable. Understanding anyone is valuable. You've built something remarkable here. An empire that has lasted 3 millennia. There must be incredible wisdom and skill behind that achievement. We'd be foolish not to try to learn from it. Thecamore leaned back in his chair. This was not going according to plan. The human was supposed to be frightened, defensive, desperate to prove his worth. Instead, Lee seemed genuinely interested in Valtherian civilization. Tell me about human history, the general said, changing tactics. Your wars, your conflicts. We've had many, Lee admitted sadly. Terrible ones. Wars that nearly destroyed our entire species. Wars fought over resources, ideology, simple misunderstanding. Finally, something useful. And how did you overcome your violent nature? We learned that we were all the same species despite our differences. We learned that cooperation accomplished more than conflict. Most importantly, we learned that our former enemies often made our best friends, once we took time to understand each other. Lee paused, then looked directly at the general. What about Valtherian history? How did your people overcome their early conflicts? The question caught Thecamore completely off guard. Prisoners didn't ask about their captor's history, but the human seemed genuinely curious, and before he realized it, Thecamore found himself talking. The early period was chaotic, he said carefully. Multiple competing factions, constant warfare, resources stretched thin. That must have been incredibly difficult for your people, Lee said with genuine sympathy. All that violence and loss, how did you cope with the pain of it? The question hit Thecamore like a physical blow. In a career spanning centuries of interrogation, no one had ever asked about Valtherian suffering. Pain was something you inflicted, not something you discussed experiencing. We adapted, he said, suddenly unsure of himself. The survivors must have carried enormous trauma, Lee continued gently. Losing friends, family, entire communities to warfare. How did your people heal from that? Thecamore stared at the human. Lee's face showed honest concern for ancient Valtherian pain. Not calculation or manipulation, just compassion for suffering beings he had never met. We didn't heal, Thecamore found himself saying. We became stronger. Strength can be a way of protecting wounds, Lee observed quietly, but underneath the pain must still be there. It must be hard to carry that for so long. The words opened something in Thecamore's chest that had been locked away for decades. Suddenly, he was remembering his own losses. Friends who died in the early conquests, family members lost to wars before the Empire stabilized, the weight of all the interrogations he had conducted in the name of imperial security. You're trying to manipulate me, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, General, I'm trying to understand you. Your empire survived something that nearly destroyed mine. There's wisdom in that survival, even if the cost was high. Doctor. Park was brought in next. General Thecamore hoped the scientist would be easier to break than the captain, but Park proved equally impossible to intimidate. Tell me about human scientific capabilities, he demanded. We're curious about everything, Park replied enthusiastically. Physics, biology, astronomy, engineering. We want to understand how the universe works. Your weapons research? Most of our weapons research focuses on defense against natural disasters, asteroid deflection, solar flare protection, that sort of thing. We spend more time studying black holes than building bombs. Why? Park looked surprised by the question. Because black holes are fascinating. They're like cosmic laboratories for testing our understanding of physics. Why wouldn't we want to study them? Despite himself, Thekmore found his scientific curiosity awakened. What have you learned? For the next hour, Park enthusiastically shared human discoveries about space-time, quantum mechanics, and stellar evolution. Her passion for knowledge was infectious, and Thekmore found himself asking follow-up questions like a student rather than an interrogator. Your people study science for its own sake? He asked finally. Of course. Understanding creation is one of life's greatest joys. Don't your scientists feel the same way? Thekmore realized that imperial scientists hadn't studied for joy in centuries. All research served military or administrative purposes. The idea of pursuing knowledge simply because it was beautiful had been forgotten. Engineer Choi proved even more frustrating. When threatened with torture, he responded with professional curiosity about the equipment. That's an impressive neural stimulator, he observed, examining the torture device. The precision control circuits must be incredibly sophisticated. How do you prevent feedback loops in the neural interface? Thekmore found himself explaining the technical specifications instead of using the device. Choi listened with the same interest he might show for any piece of advanced engineering. The ethical applications could be remarkable, Choi noted. Medical, therapy, neural rehabilitation, enhanced learning. Have you explored those uses? These are instruments of interrogation, not therapy. But the underlying technology is the same. You could probably help people with neural disorders, maybe even enhance cognitive function. The possibilities are exciting. By the time Thekmore dismissed Choi, he was thinking about medical applications instead of torture techniques. Kim So-ra was the worst of all. She spent her entire session asking about Valtherian culture, history, and philosophy. Her questions were so thoughtful and her interest so genuine that Thekmore found himself sharing stories from his youth, discussing ancient Valtherian poetry, and explaining social customs he hadn't thought about in decades. Your early civilization sounds beautiful, Kim said after learning about pre-Empire Valtherian society. The artistic achievements, the philosophical traditions, the exploration of consciousness. It must have been a golden age. It was weak, Thekmore replied automatically. That weakness nearly destroyed us. Was it weakness, though? Or was it simply different values? Sometimes what looks like weakness is actually a different kind of strength. Art and philosophy do not conquer enemies. No, Kim agreed. But they might turn enemies into friends. They certainly make life more meaningful for your own people. That night, General Thekmore submitted his report to the Emperor. The news spread like wildfire across the Empire. Stories of the fearless humans who treated interrogators like colleagues and admired imperial achievements instead of trembling before them. Within days, the reports had reached the farthest corners of Valtherian space. On the mining world of Keth Prime, workers gathered in secret to discuss what they had heard. Beings who show no fear, one whispered, who respond to strength with curiosity instead of submission. On the agricultural planet of New Valthar, farmers looked up at the stars and wondered what it would be like to explore instead of simply serving. They asked about our pain, Lieutenant Kasara's report had said. They cared about our history before the Empire. In the conquered territories, subject species began asking dangerous questions. If these humans could face the Emperor without fear, what did that say about the nature of power itself? The Kahari survivors, whose families had been executed in the throne room demonstration, received an unexpected message. The humans had requested permission to plant a memorial garden on Kahari Prime, honoring all who had died in the conflicts between their people and the Empire. The request was so unprecedented that local governors didn't know how to respond. Emperor Nexthul felt his empire shifting beneath him like sand. Reports flooded in from across Imperial space, not of rebellion or violence, but of something far more dangerous. People beginning to imagine different ways of living. Young Valtherian officers submitted requests for transfer to scientific divisions. Conquered worlds sent delegations asking about peaceful exploration opportunities. Even Imperial scientists began proposing research projects focused on understanding rather than conquest. The breaking point came when 3 entire star systems, wealthy core worlds that had been loyal for centuries, made a joint declaration. They would no longer contribute military forces to Imperial expansion campaigns. They wanted to try the human approach to interstellar relations. "This is intolerable," General Mordak declared in the Emergency Council meeting. "We must crush this defiance immediately." "With what forces?" Admiral Vorkath asked quietly. "Half our fleet commanders are requesting information about human diplomatic methods. Our own people are questioning orders." Emperor Nexthul sat in silence as his advisors argued. The Empire faced its first existential crisis in a millennium, and the cause was 4 peaceful explorers who had never fired a shot. "Bring me the humans," he commanded. Captain Lee and his officers were escorted to a private chamber, not the throne room with its displays of power, but a simple meeting room, with a view of the palace gardens. Emperor Nexthul sat across from them at an ordinary table, looking older than his centuries. "Your presence has created chaos," he said without preamble. "My empire is fragmenting because of you." "We're sorry to hear that, Your Majesty, Captain," Lee replied with genuine concern. "That was never our intention." "What was your intention?" "To explore, to learn, to understand. To share what we've discovered and learn from what others have accomplished." Dr. Park leaned forward slightly. "Your Majesty, we've heard about some of the changes happening across your empire. People are asking questions, thinking about new possibilities. That's not chaos, that's growth." "Growth?" The Emperor's voice was bitter. "My subjects refuse military service. Conquered worlds demand autonomy. Core systems question Imperial authority. You call this growth? We call it people remembering who they are beneath their fear," Kim Sora said gently. "Your empire has incredible achievements: technology, organization, cultural preservation across hundreds of species. But maybe it's time to build on those achievements instead of just defending them." Engineer Choi spoke up. "Your Majesty, we've learned that the strongest structures are the ones that can adapt to changing conditions. Rigid systems break under pressure, but flexible ones grow stronger." Emperor Nexthul studied their faces. Even now, facing the collapse of his life's work, they showed no satisfaction at his distress, only concern and a desire to help. "You claim understanding can replace conquest," he said. "Prove it. Show me how your methods would handle rebellion." Captain Lee exchanged glances with his officers, then nodded. "We'd be honored to try, Your Majesty, but we'd need to meet with the people involved, both sides of the conflict." Over the following days, something unprecedented happened in Imperial history. The Emperor arranged meetings between the humans and representatives from rebellious worlds, Imperial governors, and military commanders. Instead of negotiations or ultimatums, they had conversations. The humans listened to grievances without judgment. They acknowledged the Empire's achievements while recognizing the costs of maintaining them. They asked questions that helped both sides understand each other's perspectives. "Why do you refuse military service?" Captain Lee asked the Kahari delegation. "Because we do not wish to impose our pain on others," their leader replied. "We have seen what conquest brings. We do not want to inflict that suffering on other worlds." "That's understandable," Lee said. "But what if military service meant protecting others instead of conquering them? What if your forces were used for rescue operations, disaster relief, defending peaceful worlds from genuine threats?" The Kahari leader paused. "That would be different." To the Imperial commanders, the humans posed different questions. "What made you choose military service?" Dr. Park asked General Thekmore during one session. "To protect my people," he answered, automatically, then stopped. When had protection become conquest? When had defending Valtheria become dominating the galaxy? "Your people are safe now," Park observed. Your technology is advanced, your worlds are prosperous, your civilization is secure. What if your forces could focus on exploration instead of expansion, on discovery instead of domination? Engineer. Choi worked with imperial scientists and administrators, showing them how human society had transitioned from military conquest to peaceful exploration. The same skills that built your empire could explore new galaxies, he suggested. The organizational abilities that coordinate conquest could coordinate research expeditions. Kim Sora facilitated discussions between different species within the empire, helping them find common ground and shared interests. You all want safety for your families, prosperity for your worlds, meaning in your lives, she pointed out. Those are the same goals, you just have different ideas about how to achieve them. Slowly, incredibly, solutions began to emerge. Not through force or intimidation, but through understanding and compromise. The rebellious worlds agreed to contribute to Imperial Defense Forces if those forces focused on protection rather than conquest. Imperial commanders found themselves excited about exploration missions and scientific expeditions. Conquered species discovered they could maintain their cultures while contributing to a larger galactic community. The changes weren't immediate or universal. Many worlds remained loyal to the old ways, and some military commanders refused to abandon conquest entirely. But something fundamental had shifted in the Empire's heart. Emperor Nexthul watched the transformations with a mixture of wonder and terror. His empire was becoming something unprecedented, a voluntary association of worlds united by shared goals rather than shared fear. How? He asked Captain Lee during their final meeting. How did you accomplish in weeks what we could not achieve in centuries? We didn't accomplish anything, Your Majesty, Lee replied honestly. Your people did all the work. We just asked questions and listened to the answers. But how did you know it would work? Dr. Park smiled. We didn't know. We just believed it was worth trying, even knowing you might die for the attempt. Especially then, Engineer Choi said quietly. Some things are worth the risk. Kim Sora added, We've learned that people are usually better than their worst actions. Your empire was built from fear and necessity, but your people, the real people beneath the titles and uniforms, they're remarkable. They just needed permission to remember that. Emperor Nexthul rose from his chair and walked to the window. Outside he could see Valtherian children playing in the gardens alongside young beings from a dozen species. When had that happened? When had the capital world become a place where different peoples lived together, instead of simply serving together? What happens now? He asked. That's up to you and your people, Captain Lee said. But if you'd like, we could share our exploration techniques. The galaxy is vast. There are millions of worlds to explore, countless civilizations to meet, infinite wonders to discover. And if we encounter hostile forces during these explorations, we try to understand them first. Sometimes, hostility comes from fear or misunderstanding. Sometimes it comes from pain that needs healing. Very rarely we encounter genuinely malicious beings, but that's what defense forces are for. The Emperor turned back to face the humans. You would trust us? After seeing what the Empire has done? We trust you to choose who you want to be. Going forward, Captain Lee replied. The past is finished. The future is what you make of it. 3 months later, the first joint Valtherian-human exploration fleet departed for the Andromeda Galaxy. The expedition included scientists, artists, diplomats, and yes, military forces, but forces trained in protection and peacekeeping rather than conquest. Emperor Nexthul remained on the throne, but his role had changed.